Hello, this is the second video I'm making in a series on coping with change. And I thought I would share with you today why I came up with this subject and what it's meant to me. During the pandemic, I really experienced some real anxiety about something a little differently than I think a lot of people. Obviously, I was worried about all the virus and my loved ones and so forth. And in fact, we did lose people, acquaintances to the virus. But what I was really distressed about was the social media posts by Christians. I realized there were differences in Christian faith about how we respond to changes in the world. But I had not experienced before this level of vitriol and hostility and sarcasm, and it just seemed to get to a fever pitch. For me, I was just noticing lots of friends and family members that I'd known through the years, always been kind, were suddenly just inflamed and harsh. Being charitable, I can realize we were in the middle of a global pandemic and lots of different messages on media that people were responding to, and it was a time of real angst in the public, and Christians are not immune to that. But I did realize how divided Christians are. We are we're divided globally in a way that perhaps we have not been for a very, very long time. And it's not just the denominations, it's within the denominations. It's within local churches. And I began to write about this. And the first thing I wrote was a series of statements about doing mental health from a Christian perspective. But it began to morph into much more than that. And by the time I was finished, I had written 400 pages, which I inflicted on friends and family members. And now I realize that was pretty uncharitable because as I began to go back and edit and read, I realized that I had been wrestling with themes that were technical even for me, and I was at best an informed amateur in many of these fields because I was writing about information theory, quantum mechanics, theory of relativity, and the Genome Project, because all of these seem to me to be behind the kinds of differences that Christians were having. I'll talk more about that as we go forward. But anyway, as I began to rewrite the book and try to make it much more readable and understandable, I continued to get more and more clarity on the nature of the changes that divide us. I called my book Christianity Through the Looking Glass, and it will be available in the next few months. But I'm going to be doing little vignettes of 10 minutes or so that kind of revolve around the book and its themes. But the deal of change is where I wanted to go to first. The reason that we are having divisions is because we are responding to change differently, and we're unaware of the deepest levels that we are of change that we're reacting to. Get it out in a minute. But I began to reflect during this time on the statement that Jesus says, pretty cryptic statement: "If your eye be single, then your whole body will be full of light." In the King James, "If thine eye be single, then thy whole body will be full of light." It's a cryptic statement, and modern translations don't seem to elucidate it anymore. It remains cryptic because it's metaphorical. As I began to reflect on that, I realized Jesus is telling us not only to look at things, but to pay attention to what we're looking through. C.S. Lewis has an essay that he wrote called Reflections in a Toolshed. And as he's in the tool shed, he's looking at all the things in his tool shed, and he realizes he can either look at those things or he can look at the beam of light that's coming through a crack in the wall. If the beam of light was not coming through that crack, he wouldn't be able to see the things. But normally he's not looking at the beam of light. He's looking by means of the beam of light at things. And so he reflects on how looking at something is different than looking through something. And we all look at and we all look through. My best kind of metaphor on that is when you're a kid and you put on sunglasses, and so you've got yellow sunglasses and you put them on and everything's got the kind of yellow tint, and you take them off and they don't, and you're kind of changing the world as you move your sunglasses on and off. And maybe we can think about that as a way of explaining that everybody in the world in all times are not only looking at the world, they're looking at the world through something. And what they're looking through is the assumptions that they have accumulated along the way from family of origin, from their own tribe, from their language, from their nation, from their culture, from their religion. And these become layers like sunglasses through which we look at things and interpret things. A lot of studies been done on this and shows that we even those lenses we look through determine even what we see and what we don't, what we notice and what we don't, what we emphasize and what we do not. And so when we think about change, we look at changes in the world differently than our neighbor because we're looking through different glasses. The term for that in philosophy is worldview. And we have a worldview that shapes how we see things, how we experience the world, and how we process things. And we will not be able to have informed and respectful conversation with one another across great differences until we can understand what is my neighbor looking through. Not only is what he's looking at, he may be looking at the same thing I'm looking at, but he's looking through something that may be different than me. He has green sunglasses, I have yellow sunglasses. And I have to understand that to have intelligent conversation. One way of thinking about Christianity, which is of course the basis of which I am writing and thinking, is that it is meant to be not only a faith that one embraces and a change in one's heart. Christianity is a way of looking at the world. And I argue that for many generations, most Christians in the West have not been really purposefully adapting their way of thinking to a Christian worldview. And that takes long wrestling with something. Jesus says it like this, "Come unto me, all you that are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me." He's going to teach us how to see the world, how to experience the world. When I talk to a Buddhist, because I have read in Buddhism and many years ago did studies in comparative religions, then I realize that my Buddhist friend is coming to different assumptions because he sees the world through drastically different glasses than I look at the world. For example, in Buddhism, there is not a conception of the individual. That's an illusion. Whereas in Christianity, we're called to become increasingly a person. So as we get closer to God, it does not mean that our personhood disappears. Quite opposite to that. It means that my personhood becomes enhanced. And that's what we mean when we use the word saint in a popular usage, that someone has become Christ-like, but they are their own person because all the saints are quite different than one another. Some of them are funny, some of them are very serious, some are intellectual, some are not, and so forth. So we begin by thinking about change and saying not only what we are looking at that's changing in the world, but what we're looking through, how we're evaluating that change in the world. Um, it's time to kind of wrap this one up, but in my next session, I'm going to talk about what we mean by the words pre-modern, modern, and postmodern. And in a nutshell, they are the different ways the Western world has viewed reality. So until 1500 or so, the Western world saw reality in a certain kind of way and experienced it in a certain kind of way. And in 1500 or so, we entered the modern era. And in the modern era, we redefined what reality means and how one looks at reality. People my age were raised with modern assumptions, though I would argue that in my Appalachian culture and Pentecostal culture, a lot of those assumptions were actually pre-modern. That's a topic for another time. But what happened at the beginning about 1900 and has been increasingly happening as the decades of the 20th century unfolded and now the 2 decades of the 21st century is that we've been shifting from a modern view to a postmodern view. And that's a massive shift. And it is a shift not only on how people define morals and ethics and all those things. It is a shift in how people view and experience reality itself. And that's why when we're arguing with one another, many times we're not only thinking that someone's disagreeing with us, we think they're absolutely nuts. And you see that on Facebook enough, quite a bit. Like this politician is not only has a different opinion, he's crazy. Well, they might be, I don't know, but a lot of people that we think are crazy are actually looking at the world through a different set of lenses, and they are acting in ways that conform to a set of principles that one can learn about and know about. Doesn't mean that you're going to agree with those principles, but at least when you know why they are coming at things the way they are, it makes it much more easy to have a conversation with them that's helpful and respectful. That's a whole lot. You can tell why 400 pages of this, my friends and family were ready to hang me. Hopefully it will be in better shape when it comes out, and as it comes out in these little vignettes, then we'll be able to discuss them, and you can help me not be such a nerd. You have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in, and I pray that as you are talking to your loved ones and friends and neighbors, that you are being able to do so with charity and grace, and coming to know not only what they believe, but why they believe what they believe.